Day 180 of the still young Trump administration brought disastrous headlines for this White House. The day began with the focus on health care, specifically this colossal defeat for the president, for Mitch McConnell and the Republicans after an almost decade-long campaign, after all, to repeal and replace Obamacare. They will do neither for now, and the president, more on this later, says he and they will refuse to own this failure. The focus of the day then quickly shifted back to Russia. That's because we learned this evening that there was a second meeting between Trump and Putin at that G20 conference. After their formal bilateral meeting, this one, the start of which we were able to see. This was later, after the dinner that night, this dinner for the leaders and their spouses. Why is this important? Well, for a number of reasons. For starters, we weren't told about this second meeting, and we will likely never know what was said. The participants were Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and Putin's interpreter. No one else from the American team, according to reports. It's important because Putin interfered in our presidential election. It's important because we are in the midst of a counterintelligence investigation being led by the former director of the FBI into Donald Trump and his people. It's important because the president attends these events to do the people's business, having sworn an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. That's why it's a problem that no one apparently planned to tell us about this meeting, and again, there is no record of it. Part of the proof being cited by several sources tonight, the meeting was unplanned on Trump's part. Each leader was able to bring one interpreter to the dinner. According to the Washington Post, the Americans brought a Japanese interpreter so that our president could communicate with Shinzo Abe of Japan, Trump's dinner companion for the night. Putin brought along an interpreter with him who speaks English. Traditionally, an American president would always bring their own interpreter to such a meeting and would never rely on an interpreter working for the other side. The New York Times noted this about the dinner. Quote, foreign leaders who witnessed it later commented privately on the oddity of an American president flaunting such a close rapport with his Russian counterpart. Remember, all the other leaders were at this dinner. The other breaking story of the day on this White House and on the topic of Russia, we now know there were 8 people in the room at Donald Trump Jr.'s June 2016 meeting with multiple Russians at Trump Tower, and we know who the 8th person was. Ike Kavaladze, a Russian businessman with ties to a Russian billionaire who caught previously the attention of the feds when he pushed foreign money through U.S. banks. That's him lower right. Let's bring in tonight's starting panel, talk about all this. New York Times reporter Ken Vogel, Anita Kumar, White House correspondent for McClatchy Newspapers, and we welcome to the broadcast Alexander Vershbow, former ambassador to Russia in the Bush 43 administration, a 30-year career member of the Foreign Service, having served every president from Reagan to Obama. Welcome to you all. Ken, I'd like to begin with you. What will we not know about this one-hour meeting? What are the list of possible things we can't know?
Well, we won't know anything. We won't know what was discussed unless President Trump willingly divulges that information, which he has thus far been unwilling to do. Let's not forget, he gave a long interview on Air Force One after these two meetings with Putin. He discussed in some depth the first one, saying that he had asked twice whether Putin was responsible for, Russia was responsible for the meddling in the U.S. election. Putin denied it both times, so that's settled. We can move on from that. But in this case, we won't even know that because there was no record of it. There was no U.S. interpreter there, and Trump thus far has been unwilling to discuss it, other than saying that it's fake news and that it is, quote, sick, which he said in a tweet this evening. Despite the fact that we have now acknowledgement from the White House that it, in fact, did occur.
And, Ambassador, your successor in the Moscow posting, Mr. McFaul, said tonight that when Putin and Trump are together, Trump is, by definition, playing defense. Putin is a 17-year veteran as leader of a nation, and before that, a trained expert intelligence operative. We often ask the question on this broadcast, kind of rhetorically, what could go wrong? But as you hear of a 1-hour-long pull-aside meeting with one side's interpreter, you tell us what could go wrong.
Well, first of all, it's not that surprising that the meeting took place given the president's fascination with Mr. Putin and his seemingly unwillingness to criticize him for just about anything. But Mike McFaul is absolutely right. In a meeting like this with Putin, the experienced KGB veteran, 17 years in power, you need somebody there to ensure that what goes down is reported, and if there's any consequences to that discussion, that we know how to react. So the president was in there kind of naked, but again, it's not that surprising. It was a social dinner. But I think what's striking for me is how much he basically dissed our closest allies. He was supposed to be having dinner with Shinzo Abe, one of our closest allies in Asia. And all the other G20 leaders were gathered around and apparently were kind of creeped out by this very conspicuous side conversation going on between the two leaders.
And it was that anger that's the reason we know this story. Again, this story came about because of a robust press corps and some leaks, and not because of an official readout. And Ambassador, a very basic question here: does the fact that this meeting happened at all mean that the president was played, that Putin knew that no one could bring any seconds to this meeting, that he would have virtually unfettered access with his own team's interpreter to the American president?
Well, that's hard to say. It may have been the president's initiative to seek out Putin at this so-called social dinner. And so we really don't know what, if anything, was given away. And in fact, it's important to note that despite everybody's suspicions about the president, he so far hasn't given away the store on key issues like Ukraine. He's appointed a very capable diplomat to lead our diplomacy in trying to get the Russians out of eastern Ukraine. And the Russians seem quite fired up with rage about the confiscation of their compounds, diplomatic compounds, and the administration's unwillingness to give them back. So Putin may not actually have felt he got a lot out of all these meetings, except for the most important thing for him: respectability, the sense that he is back, he's accepted, people need to deal with Putin, that you can't isolate Russia, despite the effort of the U.S. and its allies to sanction Russia after its naked aggression against Ukraine.
At long last, the very patient Anita Kumar. And Anita, Ken mentioned the president on social media tonight. Here it is. We have two tweets to choose from. Let's see here. Fake news story of a secret dinner with Putin is sick. All G20 leaders and spouses were invited by the Chancellor of Germany. Press knew. No one in no report is alleging the dinner was secret. The fake news is becoming more and more dishonest. Even a dinner arranged for top 20 leaders in Germany is made to look sinister. No, the dinner was covered. Those are the pictures we have of the dinner. Everybody knew it was going on. It was for leaders and their spouses. So again, kind of off the point here, Anita.
Right. I mean, definitely the dinner, and these are typical dinners, right? They have dinners for the leaders, their spouses. I think it's even typical that they get up, talk to other leaders and talk to spouses. What's not typical is an hour-long conversation with someone who, is the focus of all this scrutiny here in the United States. The reports show that President Trump actually got up out of his seat to go over to President Putin, who was sitting next to his wife, Melania Trump, the First Lady, and just sat there and talked to them. I mean, it's really, there are so many questions, as you mentioned, but really a lot of this comes down to, again, it's a publicity problem for them. They didn't mention it. Had they mentioned it earlier, it probably wouldn't have been as big of a deal. During the Obama administration, they often mentioned when President Obama talked to President Putin sort of just on the sidelines in a casual way, just because they knew that we were interested in that. It's always of interest. And so they waited to talk about it. They didn't acknowledge it. Actually, it came out earlier today, and I was one of the people, as many other reporters at the White House today were asking them about it. They didn't acknowledge it until 7 p.m. And then they came out with a lengthy statement before the president's tweets that basically explained the situation and then called the entire episode absurd. That, why is this a big deal at all?
Anita, all I was going to say was it's a publicity problem unless it's a statecraft problem.
Right. I mean, they just, what keeps happening to them is they didn't have a particularly good day, as you mentioned, with health care. But what keeps happening to them is a good day or a bad day. You know, it's the end of the day and something comes out and they are sort of unable to deal with it. Hours later, they deal with it. They are very upset about this. This is what they're outraged, really, that they're saying this isn't even a second meeting. And so there is policy behind it. There is a problem with the meeting and us not knowing what's in the meeting, but there's also a media problem, a publicity problem for them.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.